Welcome, dear students, to this class on the novel The Waves by Virginia Woolf. You have seen an introduction to the writer Virginia Woolf and also on the method stream of consciousness technique. Woolf was born in 1882 into an already distinguished literary and artistic family. She became one of the leading figures in the Bloomsbury group of artists and writers. In her greatest works, Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, The Waves, she epitomizes a vision of the modern writer. Throughout her life, she suffered from mental illness and she was depressed and finally committed suicide in 1941. So, I'm not going into detail. Coming to this novel, The Waves, it is written in stream of consciousness method. I hope you are familiar with this technique by now, right? Towards the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, science and philosophy challenged traditional understandings of how people perceive and interpret the world around them. Excuse me. You have seen different modern movements like Cubism, Surrealism, Dadaism, and so on, right? Which defy realistic portrayal of life, of society. So, in the modern days, people think that what they perceive and their interpretation of the world cannot be realistically portrayed. You have learned many novels in your school days, right? By Thomas Hardy, by other writers, Tom Sawyer or Oliver Twist, or you might have read many novels with a proper plot. There is a storyline, right? But the life is portrayed realistically. No, we have seen the romanticism in art and literature. Then we have realism, and with the advent of modernism, we have quite a number of movements which defied realism. A more complicated and fast-paced lifestyle also challenged people to rethink their conception of reality in the modern days. Faced with this new context, many artists believed that it was necessary to create art that reflected the complicated reality of the world we live in. And this movement came to be known as modernism and is defined by its use of innovative and often abstract art. So you have seen the paintings by Picasso, poems by Max Weber, film Destino by Dali. All of these are examples. As a modernist writer, Woolf was interested in depicting reality as fragmented, and one of the most direct and influential ways she did this was through her technique of stream of consciousness narration. This style of narration involves entering in and out of the minds of various characters and depicting the complicated, often subconscious thoughts as they actually happen rather than in a logical order. This style of writing is central to much of Woolf's fiction, although it's particularly central to this novel, The Waves. Coming to the characters, and I have told you we don't find a proper storyline to it. What we get to know is the lives of these six characters, their reflections, contemplations, impressions. The events in the waves are told through six different characters, three men and three women who know and interact with each other throughout their lives. Perhaps the most insightful character is Bernard, who is particularly thoughtful and prone to introspection. Neville is yet another character and tends to focus on beauty, a quality which ultimately leads him to become a successful poet. We have got Louis, who combines the introspective traits of the other two males with an appreciation for the practical aspects of life. Ginny partly as a result of her defining physical beauty, is much less interested in the philosophical musings of other characters and is much more interested in social issues. Rhoda, in contrast, is fairly antisocial and tends to be more interested in her imagination than real life. Susan is prone to escape day to day events and tends to accomplish this through venturing into nature. So, these are the six characters that you find in the course of your reading of this novel, Waves. The first section of the soliloquies describes the common and the segregated education of first the three male characters and as well as the three female characters. Ginny stresses the accent on the gender division in education, a theme Virginia Woolf was particularly interested in. In her non fictional works, also, we find this theme coming again and again. As always in Virginia Woolf's works, the interiority of the characters is a vital place in the novel. That is why she has resorted to this technique of stream of consciousness technique. Rather than the storyline, what is important is the thought process. Why a particular character think like that, and why she behaves like that. The thought processes, the subconscious things are given importance. The novel is divided into nine different sessions, each corresponding to a different phase in the lives of the characters. The first section occurs during the childhood of the characters and depicts their experiences at school. And the second one deals with the adolescence and the time spent in boarding school, although boys and girls are sent to different schools. In the third section, the characters have entered into young adulthood and are beginning to understand themselves better. In the fourth section, the characters have come back together for a dinner party for the first time in a while, although they soon part ways. And shortly after the dinner party, the fifth session describes the characters learning of the death of a mutual friend, which leads them to consider the fleeting nature of life. These thoughts are central to the sixth session as well, in which the characters are adults and who have begun to settle into their own lives. In the seventh section, the characters are middle aged and continue to reflect on the lives they have chosen and the questions about life that they are still have. In the eighth session, the friends meet again and the relationships seem to be more personal, yet also tempered by the awareness of the shortness of life. This theme continues into the ninth as well, which is narrated through Bernard, reflects on the lessons that they have learned throughout the lives of the characters. Much of the novel can be seen as a mediation on the structure and the limits of the self. One of the most obvious aspects of this novel is the way that humans are both disconnected and isolated from one another and at the same time define one another. There is some sense of interconnectivity as well. This is made particularly clear through the narration. There are different characters with different perspectives and opinions, yet they all come together to describe a unified, though fluid story. The story is fluid. We cannot pinpoint to a proper plot. The novel The Waves abandons traditional structure and plot. It is divided into different sessions, as I have told you, following the lives of these six friends. The book depicts the group's thoughts, feelings, and relations with the material world as they develop as individuals over the course of their lives. Woolf herself described this novel, Waves, as an abstract, mystical, and eyeless book, a play poem. It is highly unique in its experimental engagement with style, structure, and theme. Its main focus concerns the interplay between the individual consciousness and its ever evolving relationship with the external world and those within it. In shifting constantly from character to character, their interpretations of one another as well as the external stimuli they encounter reflect the multiplicity and complexity of human perception. As far as your exam is concerned, you know, questions related to the technique used, the style of narration, that is the stream of consciousness technique, is a very important question. This novel, the waves as a stream of consciousness novel or a psychological novel. So you need to emphasize on the characters, their reflections, their thoughts, their contemplations, how they reflect on each other, how they reflect on the society, how they grew up, and all those things should be included. And sometimes you might get questions on the aspect of, there is a kind of novel called Build and Strongman novel. It's about it's a novel of growing up. So these six characters, these friends, grow up into adults, right from their school days to the adulthood. We find instances from their school days to their adulthood, adult settled life as they have become adults. So no, sometimes you get questions on that as well. So please look into this question also. Build and Strongman novels, psychological novel, Build and Strongman novel, stream of consciousness novel. And then you need to be familiar with the incidents in the explained in the novel about the characters. Sometimes for short answer questions, character sketches can also be asked. So I want you to look into the novel as well. Just give a short glance to the novel as well. And about the writer, then modernism, the waves, the novel The Waves as a modern novel, that is also a possible question. So you need to focus on the aspects of a modern novel, modernist elements in a novel. You have to talk about the World War, rejection of realism, rejection of romanticism, and how this portrayal of abstract things, modernist movements. Talk about that as well, and come to this novel and substantiate how this novel, The Waves, is a modern novel. And so these are all possible questions. And a novel of experiment, this is an experimental novel. So please go through it, and if you have any doubts, please let me know. In the next class we will be discussing, we can discuss. If you have any doubts, in Google Meet, we can have discussions. Thank you.